and so forth, everybody in there is light-skinned. The reason why is not because they were prejudiced toward dark-skinned people. The school was built for mulattoes. Mm. You see, so it wasn't prejudice in the initial part. In its inception, it wasn't. And so now we can see why some of the sorority and the fraternity preferences and things come into play. Because those were the majority of the people who were going to those schools. But as blacks try to integrate into white society, they feel that the only way for them to be accepted in their right is to look as much like whites as possible. That is the only way. That's why kids, let's see. I don't know if the young people can relate, but black people used to bleach themselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they bleached themselves because they thought the lighter they were, mm-hmm. the more acceptable they would be. Watch this, by who? Mm-hmm. Because if white supremacy is what it is, if you have... Okay. I'm getting a little excited. Let's put some phrases in our notes. First, I'm trying to find a dry spot.
Doc, before you do that, so basically the whole concept in theory of superiority versus inferiority was introduced into the black culture to basically keep us fighting one another so that the European could continue to remain in authority over those no matter what color they were in our particular race.
But it could not have happened unless there was a miseducation.
Right.
Because nobody originally accepts the superiority of another over them. Mm-hmm. They have to be pounded into submission. Mm-hmm. And then after they've been pounded into submission, another generation who does not know mm-hmm. the history previous to that mm-hmm. will be raised up, and those are the ones who are going to become enslaved by the idea, not the ones who were pounded into submission. Mm-hmm. So there's a separation that has to take place, and in the little outline that I'll give to you, it maps out the plan. Mm-hmm. I identified 8 things that happen that that will identify what could happen. But you have to have the separation of one generation from the next. If you can cut off that cultural thing, that cultural continuity between the old and the young, you can insert a false history, a false education, a programming that would cause one to be subservient to or a child of or a ward of the state, which is by nature secular. If this is a Christian country, why did you create a secular government? Because you want to do with people what you want to do with them. You want to create a mob. Yeah. And mob rule is exactly what Jim Crowism was about. It was about the control of the mob. It wasn't about rights. It wasn't about equal protection. It wasn't about constitution. It threw all that stuff out the window. We hate you. You bow down and kiss our feet. That's the end of it. So when we do these things, and I wanted to get back to this because this was a good one, but understanding the fact that you have to have a container called the state. And this is an automatic enemy to this.
The tribe, yeah.
A tribe is a construct of a family. This is governed by elders. This is governed by law. That's right. Two different things altogether. Sure. And so when you see countries like America invading countries, they're invading countries who are run by this. Because the biggest enemy to this is this. That's right. Religion serves this. Spirituality serves this.
Wow.
Yeah. Big difference.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Why did we go into Iraq for real? And see, if you know people from the Middle East, you understand their culture, you understand that nothing happened unless granddaddy say it happened. That's right. The elder men, who are the sons of the father, run the show.
That's right.
You can vote all you want to. You can have elections, this, that, and other. If granddaddy and them say it's not going to happen, guess what? It ain't going to happen. Well, you can't manipulate that type of setup.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the elders are going off of tradition.
That's right.
So you got to destroy the tradition. That's what was done to Africa. They came into West Africa. Yeah. Initially, they came as merchants. And it was a custom for the Africans to give their daughters to the people whom they were going to begin to have what they thought would be permanent, very meaningful relationships. But what happened was that the children that were born to those relationships, those were the ones that ended up becoming the minions. And you look up, all the elders were dead, and you had a group of people who did not know the ways of the old ways. And you had what Elder Dequiano talked about as a perversion of the traditions. No justice. Yeah. The destruction of justice. And so, with these two systems, you have Western countries, which was what we talked about over here. When we say Western, we mean the capitalists. See some of my cousins outside. Capitalists, communists, and socialists. How would you get this? See, this is what we call Western. And whenever you see that word Western, run for the hills. I'm saying don't have nothing to do with it. Don't entertain the conversations. You see? Because it's a hook behind it. Western does not involve you. Western puts you at the bottom. It'll be very eloquent. It'll be very polite. It'll be they'll give you pardon gifts and everything. But ultimately what happens is you're at the bottom. Yeah. Businesses, government, all of that. You can work for them, but ultimately even you working for them will lead to the undermining of your people. They'll give you a position as long as you run their program. Does that make sense? So you have these two fighting each other. Well, what did the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, what did that do? It tried to destroy the tribal unity. Did you not know that the Mujahideen were Hebrew? No. They call themselves the Northern Alliance. Well, do your research on who those folks are. Those are Hebrew people. Why do they not have anything to do with Al-Qaeda? They don't get along with each other because they're two totally different groups of folks. But the destruction of the tribal way of life is what the Westerners have always been about. Because some type of way they have to be grouped into a state. That's where you get the term colonialism from. That's the Antichrist right there. That's him. Because when you create this right here, it undermines the traditions and it gives rise to one leader. And all of that jazz that Americans talk about as the division of power in the government, and interestingly enough, there are three legs of government to fit the Trinity, if you would. The legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Yes, sir. There's a triuneness there. Well, you can throw that out the window too. Because when it comes down to a state is never controlled by a group of folks. It's always controlled by one person who has control over the mob.
Governor Bob Riley.
You see? Let me give you an example. Okay? Barack Obama, your president. Did he vote for the war in Iraq?